welcome to Gallant Conversations. Here I have the privilege of being with Meagan Crawford. If you haven't heard of her, well, now you know her. She's with Space Fund and has just an incredible wealth of knowledge in the space industry, alongside just kind of the anything encompassing space and energy. And space is everything, right? It's tied into every type of industry out there. But I mean, tell us a little bit more about yourself and Space Fund, and give us a little bit of introduction.
So that's right. Space touches everything. I haven't found an industry yet that hasn't been touched by the space industry in the last decade. If you know of one, let me know because I can fix that. But the reality is that this has been my lifelong passion. Space has always been my passion. Finance has been my background, my education, my professional experience. And so Space Fund was born of the marrying between my experience and my career and my passion that was space. And it was a heck of a journey. It was a long journey. We can dive into that if you want. But in 2018, we founded Space Fund, my co-founder Rick Tumlinson and I, in order to provide the smart capital that was missing from the industry. We saw dozens at first, and then hundreds, and now thousands of space startup companies that had amazing business plans, breakthrough technology, great customers, but they couldn't find investors because traditional venture capital was looking for software as a service business. And this kind of whole hardware space thing was
Tough to grasp.
It was so outside the norm at that time that these companies weren't able to find the financing they needed. And so we started Space Fund to fill that gap.
That's incredible. And I mean, I want to touch in on the financing bit, but let's dive a little bit deeper back into your history. This isn't your first rodeo. You've been in the space industry for quite some time. I mean, you've had a couple of startups under your belt. You want to kind of shed some light on some of that stuff?
Yeah, so I actually started my career as an intern at the tech transfer office at the NASA Johnson Space Center here in Houston. And I was doing my Rice MBA at the time, a dual degreeing in finance and entrepreneurship. And so this opportunity came up to do this internship at the technology transfer office at NASA, where you got NASA tech going into startup companies, and it just hit every button for me, right? And I have a lot of good things to say about that experience and the people I worked with, but I have to tell you that as a little kid growing up, thinking that NASA was the end-all be-all and wanting to be an astronaut when you grow up and all the rest, like a lot of young people do, I was incredibly disappointed by working for a government entity.
Yeah.
It was a little bit like working at the DMV.
For sure.
It took me 2 weeks to get a computer password.
That's rough. Yeah.
So, but I learned so much there, and I found so many interesting possibilities, and that's what really kind of spurred me on to look more into that entrepreneurial space realm that I hadn't really known existed before then.
Mm-hmm.
This is before SpaceX had ever had a successful launch. So,
and they started in 2006 or something like that, right? Is that when they first...
2000 or 2001.
Okay.
They're about 25 years old now.
That's wild to think about. And today's the 4th of March, and they're about to do Starship 8 launch.
Coming up super soon. And back in this time period, they existed, but they hadn't had a successful launch yet. And so this idea that you could do things in space if you weren't Northrop or Lockheed or Raytheon or the Russian government or the U.S. government, you know what I mean? It seemed absolutely out there, crazy. But I saw what SpaceX was doing. I saw the dozens and then hundreds of companies that were coming behind them, that were the companies SpaceX was servicing, right? So launch is a solved problem. It's not about launch. It's about what's being launched. Who are all those customers of SpaceX, right? And at that time, this was 2008, 2009 timeframe. Eventually, SpaceX and Elon and Gwen got to that first launch, and then it kind of broke the industry open. It like, wow, this is really possible. People can really build a startup in space, and famously, Jeff Bezos said, now many years ago, and this has now thankfully been proven wrong, and Jeff wanted it to be proven wrong. He said the problem with space is that 2 kids in a dorm room can't start a space startup.
Mm-hmm.
That's no longer true.
Planet Labs, for instance, right? So
One of our portfolio companies, Orbit Fab, it was two guys in a garage in Silicon Valley who bought all of their parts from Home Depot and Amazon
perfect.
and got their first demonstration unit on orbit tested on the ISS. Two guys in a lab in a garage in Silicon Valley, didn't even have a lab, in a garage in Silicon Valley, built space hardware with parts from Home Depot and got it sent to the ISS and tested.
Amazon too, right?
Well, Amazon. Yeah, we got it. We got to throw a little bone to Jeff. Yes,
Sure.
yes. Yeah,
Maybe that'll help them get a deal or something.
There were a few parts that were bought from Amazon, but that's the company that's doing on orbit refueling right now for the Department of Defense.
That's wild to think about too, right? Because like, so correct me when I'm wrong here, but like also there's like they have some sort of way in which you can kind of do a QR scan or something like that to like create some sort of transaction for the fueling, similar to that of like let's say swiping a credit card at the pump. Would that be a good comparison or?
So, my card, I do the tap
Oh, yeah.
now. I don't
Yeah,
even
you don't
swipe
even
it.
mess it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you don't even need to do that, right? And you got the QR code on your table pioneered by COVID where you just order your food and pay for it right there, right?
Yeah.
And so when we talk about rendezvous, proximity operations, and docking, two spacecraft traveling thousands of miles an hour probably started going opposite directions. Slowing them both down and being able to rendezvous them together is a difficult process. So you have these little, what, are essentially QR codes that are around the docking port. And that helps the two spacecraft align each other, right? This is up, down, left, right, okay? And why not just put another one there where you can pay? Fuel transfer complete, boom. As we're, separating, boom, there's the QR code to pay. Payment's complete.
Pretty wild. Yeah. So, question here: what happens with the payment on like that? It's outside any sort of SEC financial transaction. What do we think there? Is that a correct assumption to make? I mean,
it is a very, very unregulated environment.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's like a Swiss bank account. I don't know. I'm speaking out of some.
Well, no, because it's not terrestrial. There is no terrestrial government that governs that. Now, when you send that payment back down to a U.S. bank or a Swiss bank or whatever type of bank you have, but as long as that transfer of value, whether that's U.S. dollars or crypto or whatever else it is, as long as that transfer of value is stored in space, there is no tax regime, as far as I know.
Yeah. Maybe until people start hearing about it a little bit more, right?
It's gonna be a bit, and excuse my French here, a bit ballsy when people try and figure out if they can tax things that exist in space, because that's outside of the jurisdiction of any government. Now, I will say that each spacecraft is flagged to its home country in the same way a ship on the open ocean is flagged to its home country. So there may be some jurisdictional things that come up with that could help with this. But this is a completely unknown regulatory issue. We don't know how this is going to go.
And that's kind of why we talk about, and I've heard you say multiple times at conferences and stuff like that, it's not just about engineers. It's about accountants, about lawyers, it's about policymakers, about marketers. It's about a lot of different disciplines coming together to solve something as simple what would be like taxing.
How do you make the transaction, first of all, and then secondly, where does it go from there, and what's the tax implications? And you're right, space is a business like any other business. I like to tell people, because I'm from here in Houston, that if you have a skill set that's applicable to the oil and gas industry, you have a skill set that's applicable to space. This is a business sector like any other business sector, and we need all sorts.
And I mean, another point I want to make, we talk. I feel like your tech transfer experience at NASA just parallels so perfectly into what you're doing now with Space Fund, because you were just constantly involved with, like, I guess I wasn't at the tech transfer office, so I'm just assuming here, but you're looking at all these different types of technology coming through, figuring out kind of what's commercializable, what's not, maybe what's primed in the next 5 years, 10 years. So you have a really great understanding of what's fitting today, what's fitting in the next 5 to 10.
Well, to be fair, my time at the tech transfer office at NASA was mostly spent doing financial modeling.
That's cool.
Because engineers at NASA who created this amazing tech have no idea what dollar value to put on it. And so they're like, oh, look, finance MBA, like make her do financial modeling, you know? And many, many years later, I ran into the gentleman who I believe still runs that organization at Johnson, Jack James. Shout out if you're listening. And it was many years later. And he said, we're still using that financial model template you built for us. And I was like, Jack, please, I'll update it for you. Oh my gosh, I've learned so much since then. Please let me help you. But so it was really on that valuation of the technology side, which I think that there were very few people in the world thinking about space tech from that value creation perspective. Mm-hmm. And that's really where I got the bug.
Yeah, and just kind of to close the loop on the orbit fab, again, we can dive into so many different rabbit holes. But, the thing that I always like to kind of point out is, and I mean, you always say it too in your conferences, is just like the applicability of space technology to what we do here on Earth. And if I'm not mistaken on this point too, it's just like that same technology for the docking systems and triangulating the position and stuff, like that's what ultimately came to be like LASIK technology, right, for healthcare and life science.
The automation, right? Yeah. Okay. And I can, my mother recently had complete laser automated done cataract surgery on her eyes, right? Brilliant, amazing technology. But believe it or not, rendezvous proximity operations and docking in space is actually considerably more difficult than that because there's so many different variables. It's not just the two spacecraft going thousands of miles an hour, but it's also the gravity of the Earth, the gravity of the moon. What's in proximity to you? How many other satellites are around? They call that domain awareness, being aware of what's going on. Oh, and by the way, a couple years ago, China, Russia, India, the United States did these anti-satellite weapons tests. So there might be a piece of debris going 1,000,000 miles an hour that's going to, go right through your solar panels if you're not. So you've got so many different factors that you're trying to solve for that these become extremely complicated math problems.
Yeah.
Way above my pay grade.
Yeah, mine too. I'm here having a conversation with you, and that's fine. We're set there. But yeah, and I mean, okay, so kind of want to dive a little bit, and we're Texans, born and raised, what have you. It's been a big week, historic week here in Texas, and it's the 4th of March that we're recording this. I mean, you had 2 Texas space companies land on the moon within a week of each other, and then you have Starship launch. They haven't launched yet, right? Or
No. They pushed it back to the 6th, which is the same day Intuitive is supposed to land. So, that's Thursday. Yeah, that's going to be a really big day. Yeah.
So this is all in a span of a week, right? I mean, what's your take on that? I mean, that's just further kind of solidifying your point where it's like this sector, this space asset class, if you will, it's active. It's continuing to, kind of push the limits in terms of, being something that people can invest in or put their money towards. So I don't know if you have any kind of thoughts on that in terms of like, how would you classify space as a asset class or like something that somebody would want to invest in?
So I got to take a step back there and say that the Texas flag is the only state flag that is on the moon. There are now 2 Texas state flags on the moon. Intuitive Machines' first lunar lander, Firefly's first lunar lander. That was just 2 days ago now.
Got the little
showing it off. And then Intuitive Machines IM-2 is expected to land on Thursday, and that'll be the 3rd Texas flag on the moon. So all you other 49, y'all better catch up. Or just let Texas manage this one, and it can just be an extension of Texas. We'll just call it the Texoon or something, But this is a real business sector. These are real companies, and we've seen companies like Intuitive Machines go public recently to much acclaim, and do very well. One of our portfolio companies, Voyager, filed for their IPO in January. And so you're starting to see the proliferation of these companies across asset classes. For the longest time, the space industry, the space startup sector anyway, so not your big aerospace primes that have been around for 60, 70, 90 years, but these startup companies that are generally less than 20 years old, a lot of them less than 10 or less than 5 years old, have just been in this kind of private equity realm, which is venture capital, and private equity, which is kind of these larger transactions. What's been missing from that is kind of the full asset class discussion. Space is an industry, it's a sector, but it can touch multiple asset classes. And most people are familiar with the fact that venture capitalists and Elon Musk's friends are investing in SpaceX, and that there's these other companies. There's Rocket Lab and Intuitive Machines, and now Voyager coming down the pike to the public markets. So you got private market companies, public market companies. But where we're seeing things get really interesting is space starting to touch other asset classes like the private credit and debt markets, the real estate markets, eventually, and this is a little further out on the horizon, but biotech, minerals and mining.
That's going to be interesting. Yeah.
Right? And so whatever asset class it is that you like to invest in as an investor, private equity, public equity, debt and credit, real estate, biotech, mining and minerals, space touches all of that. And that's the asset class, regardless of the asset class, the space industry is super unique in the fact that it's not correlated to any other sector. It's not correlated to public markets, private markets. It's not correlated to gold. It's not correlated to crypto. It's not correlated to real estate. It's not correlated to anything. And this correlation factor, and I won't get into the nerdy math here, is primarily how investors choose their bucket of investments. They want to diversify. They want assets that will do well when their other assets do bad. Okay. And the other part of building a basket of assets is hedging. Hedging against black swan events or huge market downturns. Space can do both. Space is the only sector that I've got the math on, and I've tested a lot of sectors, that did not have negative growth during the subprime mortgage crisis or the COVID downturn. No other sector that I've tested can say that. So in one sector, you can both hedge and diversify, and it's fun.
I mean,
and who doesn't like that?
Yeah. I mean, it's a mission greater than ourselves, right? Like, it's the last final high frontier. Question on on what you're talking about. Like, do you think it's shielded from all this because of its exposure to government and government spending in the defense industry, or do you what do you think creates this opportunity?
I think that's a big part of it. So, depending on how you cut it, different analysts will tell you different things. That the U.S. government specifically is somewhere between 20 and 40% of the existing space economy. So about 20% is direct payments from the U.S. government to contractors to build space things. But then how much of that trickles down through the space economy, through subcontractors and payments to consultants and whatever. So it's somewhere in that 20 to 40% range. So we'll just use 30% for the conversation. So that does provide a bit of that hedging capability. When the markets go down, typically defense spending goes up. And so I do think that is a big part of that hedge, that when the markets go down, you see the space industry continue to stabilize because of that government support. But the ability to show consistent growth year over year for the last 20 years, that's the other side of the picture. That's the other 70%, which is the utility. Yeah. The utility to every industry, the utility to consumers and individuals. The fact that the space industry touches everything and is creating value everywhere you look, that's where you get that consistent growth over time.
And I'm not a venture capitalist, private equity, investment banker guy by any means. I do have, like, I guess I'm a retail investor.
Oh, there you go.
Gosh,
There you go.
those guys. But like, I guess like the way that I'm kind of hearing it, what I observe is like, the Verizons, AT&Ts, and some midstream companies like a Kinder Morgan or something like that, they kind of maintain, like, they're a value play in respect to the investment, right? Whereas like they maintain that certain share price or market share throughout ups and downs in the marketplace. So you're kind, if I'm hearing it correctly, it's kind of alluding to that same kind of factor where it's, in my mind, it's a value play, but there's also that opportunity for tremendous growth for a company like a SpaceX or a company like an Intuitive or a Firefly, based off of maybe positive sentiment in the marketplace, maybe based off of like new milestone and objectives or new customers or new government funding. Like, is that something that you would kind of, is that a good comparison or analysis, or what would you say?
So I would say that it's really hard. The data doesn't yet exist. Don't think that I'm not trying to find
fine.
it,
Yeah.
okay, with all my research that I do. But the problem is we have so few public market space companies. And when you look at the volatility, like, okay, so recording this on March 4th, the last 48 hours in the markets has been a little crazy from the volatility perspective. That's going to affect everything that's a public market stock.
Mm-hmm.
Because space has been primarily in the private markets for the last 2 decades, you don't get that day-to-day volatility. Yeah. So these things may change as more of these companies come, kind of graduate into the public markets. You may see some more of this volatility than you do see in the private markets. But, and that's one of the reasons, I think, that one of many reasons that Elon doesn't want to take SpaceX public. He doesn't want to have to deal with that volatility, that market market
Especially
sentiment,
with Starship kind of,
and the quarterly reporting and the analysts tearing everything apart. And so, and good for Elon, he's got the chutzpah and the backers and the financing to stay private as long as he wants. Although as an investor in SpaceX, I would prefer an exit sooner rather than later, but that's not up to me to say. So, I think that it really is the Wild West. I can make predictions all day. I can tell you the historical data. But until we see a real surgence of these public market stocks, a couple years past the SPAC craze, we're starting to see some more traditional type IPOs coming down the pike. I think that's really going to be the tell about whether space maintains this lack of correlation to the other investment sectors. There's no way to control retail investors overreacting to like news or whatever, or getting all behind GameStop or something. You know what I mean? Like there's no way to hedge against that. But it's going to be a very interesting next couple of years to see how these stocks perform on the public markets and see if they maintain their stability.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, I guess like the only ones that you can really look at are the traditional primes, like a Boeing, a Raytheon, a Lockheed. Like that's really all the data that you got, right?
Right, and those businesses are also diversified throughout the defense market. None of them are a pure space play. Now you have your Rocket Lab and your AST Mobile and some of these other public market stocks that are doing very well that are pure space plays, but it's very hard to kind of tuss that out. Mm-hmm. Like how much of the public market is actually space, and Boeing is apparently trying to sell their space business. And so what happens there, right? I mean, yeah. So the benefit of the private market is that at Space Fund we have enough intelligence to really measure it appropriately. Public markets are a big unknown, but required to get those exits so that we can pay our investors back. Yeah. And so it's going to be a wild ride the next couple of years, and you better believe I'll be collecting all of the data that I can.
Oh, of course you are. Yeah. I mean, you have the Space Fund Reality Index, right?
Yeah.
And then you got, probably loads and loads of stuff on the back end that I can only imagine.
Proprietary.
So, proprietary information. Only a select few people can get it. And then, like, you know, I always like to kind of paint that, like, macro kind of environment, I guess, because, yeah, there is a lot of freaking activity happening, right? And what you're seeing with SpaceX, in my mind, is they're creating, in Blue Origin and Rocket Lab and, you know, those types of companies, those are the launch segment, right? That's the exciting stuff, coming from the Earth to low Earth orbit and the lunar economy, lunar surface. In my mind, it's creating those transportation routes, right? Where, you know, you can create those, you know, ways in which you can trade, manufacture goods on another terrestrial body, being it, you know, the lunar surface one day, or with a, you know, a space station of some kind, like an Axiom or what have you. And then you mentioned these other groups like AST or ASAT Mobile, and that's a telecommunications.
Yeah, direct to cell.
Yeah.
Satellite comms, direct to cell. No more cell towers.
Yeah, that's incredible. And
really important for places in the world where they don't have cell tower infrastructure.
Of course.
Right. Yeah, it's huge.
And I mean, you saw that with Starlink too, right?
Yeah.
Like in terms of like what was happening in Ukraine, then the wildfires and stuff like that.
And North Carolina, let's not forget about them.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, let's just.
Yeah.
I don't know why I forgot about that. But yeah, no. So, and I mean, like your portfolio. I mean, like talk to me a little bit more about your thesis in terms of like or not investment thesis, but like what are the companies that you're targeting? Like what, like you've had 1, 2, now about to be a third fund that
That's
you're
correct, yeah.
got going on. So talk to me a little bit about that, you know.
So that was a lot of questions.
Yeah.
If I forget anything,
I
we'll come back.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll come back. You can remind me. So yes, we are currently raising our third fund, based on the success of Fund 1 and Fund 2, where we currently have 21 companies in the portfolio across the two funds. Some of those companies were invested in, you know, out of both. So there is some overlap. Now, if there is another venture capitalist in the world that can say this, I would love to meet you. I will buy dinner. We've made 21 investments. All 21 companies are still alive. And we are 6 and 4 years into our funds, respectively. Most venture capitalists expect a 90% failure rate. And we have a 100% success rate at this point. Now, there's a couple I'm worried about. I won't name any names. But we have proven the model of being able to do remarkable due diligence, being able to understand the founders and the product, being able to connect them to government and commercial customers. Because as important as the government side of this is, you have to have the government can be a great baseline, but you're not going to get hockey stick growth without the commercial side. You get the government baseline that keeps you alive in hard times, and then the hockey stick growth comes from the commercial customers. So I think that we've done a fairly good job, and the numbers I'm a numbers girl. I don't know if you noticed.
Not at all.
The numbers prove that. But when we look across the portfolio, I know launch is sexy. I know everybody wants to talk about launch. Everyone wants to talk about Elon. It's not really about Elon. It's more about Gwen. She's the one who makes the rockets run on time. Shout out to Gwen Shotwell. She's phenomenal and amazing. But launch is a solved problem. I'm currently tracking 183 launch companies around the world.
Wait, last time I saw you, you were speaking like it was like 80, and that was like 6 months ago or something like that.
No. 163.
Jesus.
Or 183, excuse me, 183.
Are they concentrated in the U.S. or
when I first published my paper about this in 2019, there were 120, and now there are 183 that I know of. So that doesn't include the ones that are in stealth. Okay? So we have to assume there's more than 200 launch companies in the world. According to my analysis, less than 20 will survive.
Yeah.
Okay? There's just not enough demand.
Well, I mean...
And there's not enough capability to compete with Elon on a price basis.
Not at all. And I mean, like, one thing I want to point out really quick, I mean, like, think about, like, the aviation manufacturers. It's Boeing and Airbus. That's it.
That's it.
And that's aviation, right? So we have 180.
You're going to see a lot of consolidation in this market. It's, by some accounts, I don't like to use the term, but it might be appropriate. It's going to be a bloodbath.
Yeah.
You know? Like,
I mean, rightfully so,
and
right?
These companies are going to be eaten up for pennies on the dollar as acqui-hires, as they say, just an acquisition to hire their engineers. And so it's going to be interesting to watch that play out. So for me, it's not about launch. It's not about who's building the cheaper, faster, better rocket. Elon and Gwen pretty well have that figured out. The only launch investments we have outside of SpaceX are alternative launch options. So kinetic launch, space planes, and there's reasons for that, and we can do a deeper dive into that if you want. But the biggest question for me has always been, you take two people like Elon and Gwen, two of the smartest humans on the planet. Why have they dedicated their lives to this thing called SpaceX? Well, because they saw demand for what they were building, right? There was a strong demand signal. There's somewhere a little bit over 10,000 satellites on orbit right now. We expect that number to be over 100,000 within the 10-year lifetime of our Fund 3 that we're raising right now.
And then like space debris, like how many like shred like from 0 millimeter, like 1 millimeter to like 10 millimeters. Whatever.
And we'll get there. So 10,000 satellites to 100,000 satellites. SpaceX can probably manage most of that demand, if we're being honest. Okay. But the question isn't about launch. It's about what's being launched. What are the business models that are driving the launch of 100,000 satellites going to orbit? What are they all doing? That's the question that investors and people who are interested in getting a job in this industry or just supporting it in general, that's the question you need to really be asking, is what's being launched and what are the business models of those things that are being launched. So yes, a lot of this is on orbit servicing, deorbiting satellites when they're past their useful life, collecting space debris. Although, going back to our discussion about space taxes,
Oh, yeah.
if nobody's paying space taxes, there are no space street sweepers to clean up the debris.
I mean, waste management, like,
Yeah,
that
right.
model needs to be put in place.
Whose responsibility is it to clean up the debris?
No one's.
Right.
At this point.
So that's an economic policy model that has yet to be determined, but might create a business opportunity with the space debris. But before we create space debris, why not just deorbit the satellite before it smashes into something else and creates a debris field, right? So the satellite servicing, deorbiting, the space tug model, the tugboat model, where I'll take you from one location to another, so you don't need to use your onboard propulsion. Then we start talking about the moon. Everything between here and the moon we call cislunar. We've got all of these lunar landers on the moon. How are they communicating? Home.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the satellites that are in orbit around the moon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Who owns those comm satellites? Well, Intuitive Machines.
Yeah.
Okay. Right? So you start to see all of these business models start to proliferate through the solar system, eventually Mars, and then Venus isn't really a nice place to vacation. But then we start to talk about asteroid mining.
Yeah.
And you start to talk about all these possibilities become real, and they become real in an economically defensible way. That's the problem with the space programs of the Cold War, was that they weren't economically defensible. It was about a race.
Yeah.
It was about politics. The revolution that you're seeing happen now in the space industry is about economics. It's about return on investment. It's about investors putting their money into something that can get them a return. And that has never existed in space before until this decade.
Mm-hmm. Hot take really quick. So I've had these conversations with someone, I think even in a previous recording. I'm curious on your thoughts. So cislunar, everything from Earth to the moon, and then lunar economy being the lunar surface and manufactured goods and trade associated to it. Do you consider, space companies or rocket company to be a national security threat or interest, given the fact that it's similar to that of like a naval war fleet? In my mind, like, navies were built by the U.S. government to protect the value of the U.S. dollar and protect the trade routes where manufactured goods from point A to B could, and be kind of traded upon and brought back to the U.S. we're not quite there yet in my mind with space, but we're just about on the cusp of it. And until then, do you consider it, or is it already a national security interest and threat? And is that something that could play into the economics?
So I've got to give a very strong shout out here to my good friend and business partner Dan Schatzman, who, by the way, believes in this so strongly that he named his dog Sis Lunar.
Oh man.
Yeah,
Does
we
he
call
have a nickname for it? Like,
well, sis or sissy.
Sis?
Yeah,
Sissy?
yeah.
Okay.
She's adorable. Okay, but yes, he literally has a dog named Sis Lunar, and but he talks a lot about the Bretton Woods Agreement, which is what really started this U.S. Navy patrolling the seas and protecting the global economy. And yes, we're seeing that develop right now. That's really, as far as I'm concerned, there's two purposes for the Space Force. It's economic protection and defense. That's really it. And I'm not going to put words in existing or former presidents' mouths, but it seems to me that it's very clear that that's what Space Force was created to do.
And now it seems to be like an offensive capability that we also need to have readily available.
Offense is defense, right?
Sometimes, yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
I mean, it depends on which Super Bowl you like.
Yeah.
Like, what was it? The Denver Broncos, the Seattle Seahawks. It was like a freaking blowout, and then I don't know. Anyway, that's a whole different conversation. But
So Philly did to Kansas City recently.
Yeah,
so
it
yeah,
was fun.
yeah,
Good
it
times over
was fun. It was a fun game. But yeah, so there is definitely that aspect to it. It's policing the high ground. Space is literally and figuratively the high ground now. It used to be that goods, services, economies, GDP were based on moving goods around the world. One of the things that I like to say about space, again, looking at it from an investment sector perspective, show me another investment sector that has unlimited upside potential. In space, you have unlimited energy, unlimited real estate, unlimited resources. Is there any other investment sector that has a truly unlimited upside potential? So protecting that economic value should absolutely be at the core of what any country's defense system is doing, and especially America as the leader in this domain.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, God, your friend, I met him a couple of times, General Bucky Pateau, right?
Yeah.
Like, he was talking about this in his, 120-page freaking report. I don't remember which one it was called, but, that's another angle, right? Which is China is 10 years ahead of the United States, technologically speaking. And, there's also, Dan Golden or whatever that was talking about how the IP associated to the United States is degrading in a sense, right? So, I mean, it kind of takes into that fact and that matter too, which is we need to be supporting these commercial space companies, this industry, and everything that kind of plays into it to kind of help push it forward to create that economies of scale, right?
Well, that's exactly where the U.S. has always led in the world, is our ability to innovate. It's the entrepreneurial mindset that has kept America at the head of the pack for as long as you and I can certainly remember, and much longer than that. And that's what you're seeing happen in the space industry right now, is these innovators, these entrepreneurs. They're seeing an opportunity. They're seeing a technical revolution going on. And they're saying, I can make that work. Mm-hmm. I can make $1 out of that. Mm-hmm. I can convince an investor to give me money to do that. There are very few other places in the world where that's possible. And that's the way America always has, and in my mind, always will lead, is leaning into that entrepreneurial innovation, move fast and break things mindset. Many, many moons ago, I went to a conference. It was a nonprofit that was holding an annual conference, and one of the founders of that nonprofit got up on stage to read the credo for this nonprofit. And there was one phrase in that credo that reached off that stage and grabbed me by the heart and soul And I knew I was in the right place with the right people in that moment. And it was to use the power of free enterprise to lift humanity permanently off-world. There is no force, there is no driver strong enough to make that happen than the power of free enterprise. It has to be profitable or it's not sustainable.
Right.
And that was Rick Tumlinson, my co-founder at Space Fund, 10 years before we co-founded Space Fund, speaking at a Space Frontier Foundation conference. And I said, this is it. This is what I'm going to spend the rest of my career doing.
That's awesome. And I mean, another point I just want to make here, I mean, highlighting Space Fund, right, which is, and highlighting the state of Texas, I mean, we talk about this, pooling of capital to support the space industry and stuff like that. And, typically you find it on the East and West Coast. But, I mean, Texas is uniquely positioned. We have 2 stock exchanges coming up online in Dallas, Fort Worth area. And then, you are a pure space VC firm. I think you're the one singular pure VC firm in the state of Texas. And then you have 2 others. So you're starting to see that pool of capital, that innovation, and that manufacturing might that could help support this great cause and all those great words that Rick always goes on and talks about, right? So it's exciting times.
So I'm assuming Venus Duggleby at
Sassy?
Yeah. Sorry, Sassy Duggleby at Venus Aerospace.
Yeah.
Yep. My words got mixed up there. So they're creating a rotating detonation rocket engine.
That's pretty sweet.
It's pretty freaking cool. Okay, a little bit outside my wheelhouse because it's not quite a space plane, but really, really proud of Sassy and what they're doing over there. I like to look at the economic engine in Texas that we're creating right now as a rotating detonation rocket engine, right? You've got to have that early stage venture capital that's willing to take the risk. That's where Space Fund fits in. These other 2 VCs, one in Austin, one in Dallas, who shall remain nameless, that are maybe a little bit more defense focused, but also do a lot of space venture capital investing. And then after that, you need private equity, you need debt capital, as we discussed, you need people developing the real estate so these companies can build their manufacturing plants. You kind of need this whole of asset class, infrastructure to take these companies around the circle towards profitability. Then you get to that IPO. Now, what happens when these companies IPO? The investors get their money back. The startup founders get their money. So what does everybody do? Let's do another startup. I'll invest in that person again. Boom. Now we go around and around and around and around until you have liftoff, right? And so that's what I'm working on with many friends, many colleagues, many supporters, many people in government and private industry, trying to build that rotating detonation rocket engine here in Texas, where every space company wants to IPO in Texas. Every space company wants to start in Texas. And Texas has all the resources to keep you going round and round that circle until it's not only the Texoon, the Texas moon, but all of the solar system belongs to us.
There we go. So where are we placing our flag on the moon?
So I have a great picture that Grok AI made for me of the Texas flag on Mars.
Okay.
Because when we go to Mars, we're going to be leaving from Texas.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah.
So
no more Florida's needed, I guess.
No offense to my dear friends in Florida. Love you guys. But according to the Catholic Church and all of the old world mentality, when you find a new world, immediately it becomes part of the diocese in the Catholic Church of the country from which you left. Meaning the bishop of South Texas will become the bishop of Mars.
Oh, wow.
Okay. By default.
Yeah.
Texars?
I like
Texoon, Texars,
yeah.
we'll figure it out. Well, You're the marketing branding person. You'll come up with better names than I do.
Oh, we'll figure something out collectively here
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I mean, so yeah, I feel like we could have touched on a lot of things. I mean, like you have, gosh, who was that startup that you mentioned that was IPOing Voyager?
Voyager, yeah.
I mean, like that's an exciting bit. I'd love to kind of talk a little bit more deeper into it on another time. And then just kind of all these different.
You should have me back for a podcast. We'll just do a portfolio review. We'll go
Yeah.
through all 21.
Yeah, and I mean,
And like any good mom, I love them all the same. I have no favorites, so we have to go through all of them if we're going to do it.
So I can't just say like your favorite. What's your favorite?
I don't have favorites.
All right, that's
Yeah.
fair. That's
If
fine.
you ask my actual children, they'll say, "No, mom doesn't have a favorite amongst us because it's the dog. That's mom's actual favorite."
Probably a safe answer.
Yeah, so, and I'll stand by that. The dog's still my favorite, but I do love all the portfolio companies the same.
That's fair. That's probably the right way. I mean, I wouldn't want to pick a favorite client as well.
See, there you go. There you go.
No,
There
for
you go.
sure. They all
At least
keep you on
it's
your toes.
at least not with the camera running.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
After the camera rolling, I mean, yeah, we'll get into the thick of it now. But I mean, so VC firm, you have years of experience. If people want to kind of reach out to you and like, let's say a startup, an entrepreneur, or a founder, I mean, where do they connect? How do they reach you?
So it's really easy. I like to say that we were first to the game because we own the URL spacefund.com, which makes it very easy to remember. And so if you're a potential portfolio company, if you have a space startup, even if it's just still an idea, there's very rarely anything that's too early stage for us. And that's one thing that's actually a little bit unique about our venture capital firm. Is most venture capital firms will focus on pre-seed and seed, or Series A and B, or Series C and later. We'll look across that spectrum. There's nothing too early and there's nothing too late for us. If it's a good idea, we want to hear about it. So if you go to spacefund.com/submit to submit your company for consideration, there's a little form to fill out, attach your deck. We'll take a look. We'll always take a look. If you're interested in learning more about Space Fund, go to the website. We've got a great market intelligence section. You can see the reality ratings. You can see the papers we've published, all of the market data that we have. There's also a for investors section. If anybody is an accredited investor and wants to learn more about that, we've got a couple of SEC hurdles that we got to go through to talk about that. But it's all there on the website. Go take a look. Or you can just Google me if you spell my name correctly, which I'm assuming will be in the
Yeah, we'll have
in the description. Yeah,
For sure.
It'll all be there. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I mean, any shout out to like SFA or anything like that? I mean,
Oh, Space
SFA
Force
Texas?
Association. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're as you know, you and I see each other at those meetups quite frequently. Really excited about what the Space Force is doing. Both my grandfathers are military. In the case of my grandfathers, were military. And so really, really happy that the Space Force just exists and do whatever I can to support that. So also, I mentioned the nonprofit, the Space Frontier Foundation, the National Space Society. Are you going to the conference in Florida in May? National Space Society?
I guess now I am, for sure.
Okay. Our friend Sean Graham is going to be
Oh,
there.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. There we are,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. So shout out to Sean. Hi, Sean. And the last thing I would like to leave with is one of the best pieces of advice that I got early in my career breaking into a new industry was go to the conferences and volunteer. They always need volunteers to work the reception desk or to stand at the elevator and give people directions, or all those lovely people you interact with at a conference. Most of them are volunteers. That's a great way to save you $500 or $1,000 or $5,000 on a conference badge, is to go and volunteer. Get to know the people who run the nonprofits, because they're typically the same people who are running the for-profits that can hire you. Mm-hmm. So for those of you who want to just get involved, who want to look for career opportunities, go and volunteer. Find a space conference that's local to you. They're all over the world now. Like there's literally too many of them for me to keep track of at this point. Go and volunteer. Work the registration desk. Shake people's hands. pass out business cards, even if it just says student on the business card, start to have those conversations and get involved as much as you can. Space needs everyone.
Oh, it sure does. And they need you as well. So cheers to that. And thank you so
Cheers.
much for joining us for a Gallant conversation.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
Until next time. Awesome.
Thanks, James.